We were in Christie Indian Residential School in 64, I think it was 64. The tide came in. The tide came in probably about, I guess about a couple 100 feet, in, out, about 3 times that I remember, and one of my first cousins again was sitting on a log, or just standing on a log on the beach, and he got taken out by one of the waves, or the tide, and we had to go get a canoe and go get him, because he was drifting out on this big log, But but you hear the stories about how scary it is, and we need to prepare for it. We need to be ready for it, because it can happen tonight. And are we ready? I don't think so.
On the northwest coast of Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Indigenous peoples have told stories of the Great Saltwater Floods. One of these stories is the 1700 tsunami.
When the tsunami hit our shoreline, it pushed the pebbles up over this hill here, and it spread the pebbles out into the middle of the lake.
January 26, 1700. A magnitude 9 earthquake ruptures in the Cascadia subduction zone, producing a mega tsunami so large it reached the top of mountains. It's one of 3 great floods recorded in Indigenous history.
Is that we know in our family history that we are the survivors of the last big earthquakes, the big tsunamis, the first one being very, very big, that covered the whole mountaintops with, that earthquake happening, and then the tsunami covered the whole mountaintops. The second was the mountaintops, so we still didn't get covered by the water. The third was that it was pretty well halfway down the mountainside.
Hesquit carver and painter Tim Paul reflects on the legend, Earthquake Foot.
A hiker, a hunter, a traveler, walking through, the woods up in the mountainsides. Heard singing and very happy and laughing little guys, dwarfs, inviting them into his house, into their house, inside the mountain. And once they enticed him and got him into their home, into their house, they sang and around and danced around a huge big drum and asked him to perform with them and dance with them, until he tired and, just dancing and singing until he stumbled into that big, huge drum and became, inflicted with that disease that they used to call, and at that time, earthquake foot. Was then, whenever he took a step and he was inflicted with that disease, now he wanted to make his way back down Yukon, down towards the village. But every time he took a step, the whole mountainside, land, terra firma began to shake and tremble.
Petroglyphs near Port Alberni tell a tale of a mega tsunami.
So this is a historical site, petroglyphs, and the carvings on these petroglyphs depict a great flood that washed creatures into Sprout Lake. And if we see here, the central motif is the kakawin, which is what this site is named after. And the kakawin is our orca, a killer whale. And the kakawin was washed into Sprout Lake during a great flood. And so the peoples that lived here observed the orca swimming in the lake. So they made these carvings, stone carvings, to record the history of the creatures that they saw in the lake after the flood. So there's kakowin, there's turtles, there's a depiction of a sea wolf down low. You can't really see, the water's covering it, and different strange creatures which we don't really know what they are. So this site tells a story of that great flood. Right, well, if we look that way to the south, this is the head of Sproat Lake. We call it Al-Kaput, which means that the water is draining out. So the Sproat River begins there, and that river begins its journey down to the Tsunamis River, which exits out into the Alberni Inlet. So that is the most likely route that the water would have washed its way up to reach here to Sproat Lake.
Having endured 13 tsunamis in the last 6,000 years, West Coast indigenous peoples adapted and developed canoes that could hold a large amount of people. These canoes were strategically placed along the shores and in the mountains.
They had a big, what they called flood canoe, and it was huge, very, very different from the whaling canoes or the sealing canoes that you see today. This canoe was just oversized, that would take a lot of the family members in. So there's 8 different types of canoes that we have. But that big one would be the 9th.
They used to have a big canoe. One was up this way somewhere. When they had the village out here, they'd run in, and they had like 400 feet of rope tied to, a big stump or a rock or something, and everybody would jump in there and just hope for the best. And they had one like that up west too, so that was our safety net back then, was a big canoe with rope tied into it, and somewhere in the small hill somewhere. And
when the flood happened, they went to the highest mountain and cut down the biggest tree, and then they had it there ready and waiting for when the flood came. And they built big, huge rope made out of the cedar bark and tied it to the next biggest tree. And then they made a whole bunch of the canoes and tied them all together. And they wanted to have it on the highest mountain, because when the flood was happening, they needed to go to the highest spot.
There's evidence, offshore evidence, of the last 10,000 years, and looking at the turbidite records from the soils on the ocean floor, we can see that there were 19 full ruptures of the Cascadia subduction zone. And between those events, there's been as little as like 150 years between major events, and as much as almost 1,000 years. And so what we know is that there is a threat out there. We understand that this threat has impacted communities, every 300 years, plus or minus 200 years.
March 28, 1964, at 5:36 p.m. in Prince William Sound, Alaska, the largest earthquake ever measured in North America struck. It generated a 9.2 magnitude earthquake, producing a 200-foot wave. Within 4 hours, it reached Vancouver Island.
Welcome to the Zabalas Museum. And if you want to know a little bit about the tsunami of 1964, we've got a few good examples right here in front of me. 8-foot wall of water hits the Amai Inlet and tore apart some of the isolated communities. It did some damage here in Zabalas, moving some buildings around quite a bit, and a lot of the homes at that time were built on logs, and the big huge logs, maybe 3 foot or so through, and they were just raised up and then settled back down. In some cases they were moved, as in the case of the community hall. And I would tell you that the community hall was interesting because it had a huge log, probably about 4 foot, maybe 5 even got through the door and into the building quite a ways, and the loggers in town got together and cut it up and hauled it away.
During a full moon on Good Friday, 3 minutes to 11 p.m., the sleepy Hesquit community of Hot Springs Cove were rudely awakened by a torrent of rushing water. Harold Amos started gathering supplies.
When the 64 tsunami hit, I was living in Hot Springs Cove, and we weren't warned, or there was no warning at all for such an event.
2 houses out of 18 survived the impact of the wave. 1 house exploded into flames. Harold Amos' family had to quickly move to higher ground.
I was at my grandmother's house. It was up on stilts. And there was 3 families in there. My father and my aunt, his sister, were all there, plus my grandparents. The children carried lighter stuff up the hill. The adults carried the food, blankets and stuff, so we spent about 3 hours up there, maybe more. And then the wave was about 20, 25 foot, I guess, and it wiped out the village. It leveled the place. My uncle's house got moved back about 40 feet and placed right on a stump in his living room. And my other uncle, his little house got taken out and it caught fire on the way out and just about set off the fuel tanks at the store.
I had lots of relatives that were in Hot Springs Cove that were just about, they were wiped out, the village,
Oh, yes.
And I had first cousins, and my grandmother were just about lost in that tidal wave. Good, the stories that I hear was that my grandmother's house got taken out. It floated out, and they just got her out of the window, and the house sank.
In 1964, I was 24 years old, and our bunkhouses were propped up on big logging skids. They're about that high, the logs. The bunkhouses were on top of it. And the water, when it came up that high, the skids, it didn't damage the bunkhouses.
At home in Nuu-chah-nulth, the tidal wave hit, and after it calmed down, they had a head count. Our ta'i with our top chief was missing, and everybody said, "Spread out, look for him, because he's an important person in our community. Look for him." So they all spread out looking for him. Good, they found him in church praying. I think it was a little late for that.
38 hours later, repercussions of the wave was still being felt in the small village of Esperanza. Georgina Amos was attending church with her sisters and noticed the rockfish had been pushed up to the surface.
It was on a Sunday, and as a rule, we were always in church Sunday mornings, and during service, we could see the ocean from the window. The tide was coming up really fast. Like, it didn't come in a wave, it just rose really high and went down really fast. And after the service was done, we hopped into a skiff, me and my siblings, and we're paddling around in the inlet Esperanza, between Hecate and Esperanza, and there was hundreds of ground fish floating upside down, trying to swim, and their bellies had come out of their mouths. My sisters were flipping the fish into the boat. We got a boatload of them and brought them over to the hospital where they could process and feed the patients. So a lot of the patients were First Nations. And we just couldn't believe how quick the tide would come in.
Something that's really important to understand about tsunamis is that in such event, the event won't be limited to just one wave. It will be a series of waves. And these waves can last several hours. The cyclic incoming of these waves can last several hours to even days. So once the first wave has arrived, propagated, impacted, and then receded back to the ocean, you're not out of trouble yet.
When we do a tsunami project like the one we're doing for Strathcona Regional District, what we want to do is create a digital elevation model. So that's like a representation of the Earth and the seafloor.
At Ocean Networks Canada, Geographic Information Systems Specialist Mark Rankin is working on digital elevation models for the northwest coast of Vancouver Island. Integrating mapping into sophisticated propagation models allows communities to prepare safety plans based on expected water levels and current velocities.
So we take a bunch of different data coming in from ships, coming in from planes, and we map that out into what's called a DEM, a digital elevation model. And this is showing what the seafloor looks like, what the land surface looks like without buildings, without trees, just the bare earth. And because we're working in such a remote area, sometimes data at this quality doesn't exist. So we need to either get a plane out there, get a boat out there to capture data for us, and that's exactly what we did for this project.
So there was several maps that were produced as part of these projects. There was maps of the hazard over water, so we're looking at how big is the tsunami wave is going to be in the ocean and how fast the water will be moving as a result of the passing of those tsunami waves. And this is information that is crucial for mariners. This study area is very remote. A lot of the communities, their main access is by boat. If we think of Upsitas or the Cayuquet area, boating from Fair Arbor is the main access.
And really what this project is about is to trying to instigate momentum and action around mitigating our risks for the next tsunami. And so for us, understanding what happened in 1964 with the Alaska earthquake and how that impacted these communities, and really having that to a detail with the knowledge of people that survived that event and witnessed that event, but also from what the computer models say and what does the impact look like on communities, and then compare that with what a worst case scenario could look like, which is the Cascadia subduction zone, and how do communities that remember that event from '64 apply that knowledge to the next big earthquake like the 1700 event.
I think what stood out in this study the most is essentially how different areas can be affected differently. Because of the geography, you have the open coast, which is basically facing the ocean, and the way the wave will interact in the open coast is very different than how waves propagate inside inlets, for instance.
So it's a real study that goes from understanding the hazard, understanding local knowledge, understanding engineering, understanding the science, and then putting it to practical application. What can we as a community do about this risk to improve, again, the outcomes of the next time that we have a major earthquake on the Cascadia subduction zone or in another place in the Pacific Basin that can impact these communities.
April 23, 2014, 20 kilometers off the coast of Cayuquet, a 6.7 earthquake rattled the village of Hoopsitas, generating a massive surge of water through the bay.
This one was during the day, and the water was rushing right in through the whole bay, coming right out, and it just, on that side was all white water coming in there, and same with over here, and it would just come right up 15 to 20 feet. Like this island would be underwater when it was at its peak, rushing in. And then like 20, 25 minutes later, same thing, it just all rushed right back out. And then you'd see the beach way out there. The whole bay just about dried up then. But every 20 minutes that cycle happened, and it was, I think we've seen five cycles where it repeated that, and then it kind of finally slowed down.
In a worst case scenario, when there's a tsunami, we've learned that we have very little time actually, that we actually will shake pretty good. And after the shaking stops, our next goal will just be to get to higher ground. And for our community in Hoopsitas, that really just means getting up to the school.
After a number of close calls, the people of Hoopsitas have become leaders in tsunami preparedness. They have widened roads and installed solar panels in case they have to live off-grid.
The school is our mustering point and mustering station, and we've also built up a fairly robust emergency equipment storage up there so that we have equipment to last us for a while, because most likely we will be on our own for a little while, and so we have to be prepared for that.
We have solar panels, there's diesel generators. They're able to power our community if anything else fails. Sea cans are up there and they're fully loaded with emergency stuff, blankets, water, like food packs and stuff like that. And, but yeah, there's a whole plan in place, getting the youth and the elders first and things like that. The biggest improvement I've seen too is we've been working with our neighbors across the bay and in the surrounding islands as well, and sharing our emergency plan and make sure they have one, and things like that, and just letting them know that, aware of the tsunami siren.
This is where my house used to be, right here.
Fran Wallace grew up in the old Quatsino village of Huatis before they were forced to relocate to Cole Harbour.
Yeah, one of the things that they used to watch out for when they were expecting the tsunami was the tide. If the ocean came up further than what it used to do, then they would know that it might be coming soon. And if they saw it come in and then go out again, that was another warning that it might be coming soon. So we were always ready and prepared for that. That was our old school there, and there's a field up here where we were told to all meet up there when the tsunami hits.
Tsunami awareness is ingrained in West Coast culture. David Wallace talks about how Thunderbird gained his sight to warn Quatsino's 5 tribes when a natural disaster is to occur.
The legend of the Thunderbird is back in the day he didn't have good eyesight, and the snail, Quetzal, did. And the Thunderbird asked the snail to switch eyes, because Thunderbird said, I feel something coming. I need to see a long distance, and I want to fly up. That way I could warn the people of any dangers coming. So they agreed and they switched eyes. And then after the event happened, the Thunderbird told the snail that I like the eyesight and that I'm going to keep it. All the different nations have different animals that have warned them. One nation, the Mama-Lilika, I think, they were warned by a butterfly.
That's our 11th relative earthquake. The 10 relatives of nature, from the sky, the land, the sea, the rivers, the lakes, the ocean, all of that. You look around, and the rainbows, the winds, all of that we're related to. We're ukhu, we're relative, we're related to nature. So that's the you know, where we begin to always understand, you know, our place in this world, in this universe. That reminder from that 11th relative of ours, the earthquake, is that we are the very, very smallest part of this universe, of this world. We're the tiniest, tiniest little bird in this world as human beings. So that the 11th relative of ours reminds us every now and then, and very quickly, our place, you know, and how small we are in this world.